Welcome to the Fat Feminist Witch Podcast, the show where I haven't done nearly enough ranting, raving, or wand waving in the last few months. On today's episode, I wave an eager goodbye to 2016 and all of the challenges that came with it, and I'm also going to talk about ableism in the New Age, pagan, witchy communities, and I've got a new book review of Shadows for everybody to help you practice a little mindfulness, which is a new thing I've learned in 2017. It's the last episode of the year, but it's the start of something totally new. Hi everybody! Happy New Year! I love New Year's. I don't really love Christmas or the holidays, but I really do love New Year's. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about ableism in the magical communities, like I said. This is mostly brought on by my own experiences of the year, so I am going to talk about the stuff that I've been through this year just a little bit. So if I'm being totally honest, I really wanted to give up on this show and kind of the whole Fat Feminist Witch thing that I've done, the persona I've built. And I've wanted to give it up a few times this year. Again, this is something I already mentioned at Halloween, so it might be old news. But I'm still dealing with it, so, bear with me. In the middle of the summer, I lost my job to a fire. I lost my best friend as a result of my own mental illness and how challenging that can be for the people around me. And I went from living totally alone for years to all of a sudden living with my family. Basically, I went from struggling like a little bit to struggling a lot in a really short amount of time. I started turning inward and pushing people and things away from myself. I took a break. I went to the beach, which was actually pretty great. I tried to adjust to being part of a family again, which unfortunately triggered a lot of long buried feelings from my childhood, which was often fairly difficult. And then the US election happened in November, and I really just stopped having anything to say. Everything I had planned to talk about or address seemed trivial all of a sudden, really, really meaningless. All I wanted to talk about was the fear and the hopelessness that I felt after that. But I'm Canadian, and it just didn't feel appropriate all the time. You know what I mean? I know I won't be as affected by the new administration as, obviously actual Americans or marginalized people will be, and that the most important thing that I could do at that time was to stop talking for a little while and to listen to what they had to say. And, that didn't really make me happy either. Like, there was no happiness there. It was really difficult. I haven't wanted to say too much, during the election it was one thing, but afterwards it was time for me to just back up. And I'm glad I did. I'm still really afraid of what that will mean for this country that I can literally see from my window right now. I mean, I can see Detroit, the building we call the Rensen, the GM building. I can see it from my window right now. I'm looking at Detroit. And I'm afraid of what the new administration means for everyone there and everyone all over the states that I know. I don't have any American friends who are giving up, though, and that makes me feel a little bit better. I would love nothing more than to drive through the U.S. and grab you all up and bring you here to Canada, but I know that that isn't going to help. I mean, it would help Canada. We'd love to have y'all. So if you guys are planning a move, we'd love to have you. I know how amazing most of you are, and you can only do good things for Canada and for my country, but I trust that you can do that stuff in your own country. I know it's not going to be easy, especially now that so many of you know how little some of your friends and neighbors really value you and your rights. And I'm sorry that happened. That was, it's fucking disgusting, honestly. And I feel very ashamed that happened. But there is that little bit of strength in, okay, it's only up from here. There's only one way out of this, and it's up. So I believe in you guys, and I know that you guys can make it a little bit better. So since the election, I've been at quite a loss to say anything that might do any good at all, especially in terms of witchy stuff. I mean, hex Donald Trump, hex Mike Pence. That stuff's awesome. It's awesome. And I'm sure if you did that, it made you feel a lot better. And I'm glad. A lot of people donated to Planned Parenthood in Mike Pence's name, and I tend to see that as having just a little bit more value. I'm not saying you can't do both, but witchcraft seemed a little bit less helpful. I needed real world stuff, and witchcraft wasn't helping out. So I haven't really done any. I haven't really done that much at all. It's difficult when you are mentally ill sometimes to get into that right frame of mind, and then that whole situation just added an extra layer to it. So my recent intensified struggle with mental illness has really brought the topic of ableism in the metaphysical, magical, new age, whatever community or movement to the front of my mind. Most notably in the area of positivity and what I like to call chronic positivity culture, where you become kind of addicted to positivity. And there's lots and lots of people like that. This is a big thing. I mean, a lot of the people you find that are proponents of things like The Secret tend to take it too far and get a little bit shitty. So there's this school of thought that puts forth that our emotions attract like things and situations into our lives. So if you want to walk through the world focusing on feeling positive emotions, positive life experiences are going to follow you. This, of course, means that the flip side is true, and if you dwell on negative emotions and experiences, you attract negativity in your life. And while in some individual instances, I really see the value in this idea, this also poses a really difficult problem or question, which is, if I have a mental illness that makes it difficult, if not impossible, to ignore negative thoughts or emotions, am I being punished by the universe for being ill? Likewise, if someone lives in extreme poverty or a war-ravaged area, are they to be shamed for feeling hopeless, overwhelmed, or scared? For many who advocate this chronic positivity culture, there's just no room for those who struggle to get with the program. And oddly enough, I find that a lot of the people who are into this also think that you should be able to heal all of your illnesses by metaphysical means or by thought alone. The same person who once told me that I manifested both my own mental illness, but also the genetic physical disease that I was born with, but that using medication to treat those things was a sign of weakness and a lack of willpower. She didn't need antidepressants for her diagnosed depression because she had real willpower, and she used the power of crystals and thought to just make it go away. She was a co-worker at a new age store that I worked at. She said this to my face, and I swear to God, I almost burst into flames. It's just so offensive. It's just so offensive. Just like this, I've had people tell me that they've been told that their mental illness is caused by a misalignment of their chakras, or the presence of negative entities, or something else kind of esoteric, with the idea that it could be a genuine illness never really coming up and being a totally outrageous improbability. It's as if these people don't believe in actual illness, that you can just be ill, you can get ill or be born ill or something like that. They just believe that it's something that you've done to attract that to you. And quite frankly, that's just bullshit. It's bullshit. It's also incredibly hurtful and offensive. I see memes get shared on social media all the time by metaphysical, new age, and pagan sites. And I'm sure you've seen it. You know, it's a split image. And it proudly proclaims that like antidepressants are poison or garbage or shit. And they offer up like a nature walk as a suitable alternative to shame those who rely on medicine to make sure they have a happy life. You know, you see the picture on top is the forest and it says, this is an antidepressant. And then you see the picture of the medication on the bottom and it says, this is poison. It's so hurtful and so offensive. This really contributes to the overall stigma in our society of mental illness in it like a huge way. And this idea really, really hurts people. Toxic people that you hear all about, or those negative people, they're often that way as a direct result of depression, anxiety, or trauma that they've lived through. And so when I see someone post or hear them say how they're giving up toxic people for New Year's, or that they ditched a friend because they don't need that kind of negativity in their life with like some cute emojis, the way that I see that person changes forever, because the way they look at me is obviously not what I thought. I start to believe that it's only a matter of time until I am that toxic person in their life. I am that source of negativity and they don't need me. I see myself as toxic, as poison, as broken, and as totally worthless. It really makes me feel alone. I feel like I will never be worthy of friends or a family or love. And I feel like that all the time anyways. My depression makes me think that way all the time, even if it's not true. And I don't need it from other people, and I certainly don't need it from stupid Facebook memes, so I need y'all to stop sharing that shit. That one specifically is bad, but there's a bunch of them. And it's not just, these fabled new agey people out there who perpetrate this kind of ableism either. It's kind of everywhere in the world. You come up against it with doctors, with teachers, with friends, with family, whatever. And it's not just the spiritual community, but when it comes from a spiritual community, it's a little bit extra fucked up, I think, because everyone's supposed to be welcome. And it's not just other people that aren't me. I'm not perfect. I have done this more than one time on the show. More than once this year, very wonderful, very understanding people have messaged me to point out how frequently I use the words crazy and insane as descriptors. In fact, no joke, just about 3 minutes ago, I used the word insane to describe something, and I'm going to be editing it out just because these aren't nice things to say. I often use these words when I mean things like outrageous or unbelievable or nonsensical, difficult, confusing, or even sometimes when I mean totally unethical, and I should just say those words. That's not even to mention how often I use them as like a description of measurement. Like I have a lot of bananas. I don't have a crazy amount of bananas. That doesn't even make sense. So I use these words all the time without thinking about it. I use these words to talk about my own mental health all the time. And this is the part where I realized that there is really a problem. I like to use the word crazy all the time to describe myself. And I've realized the only place this comes from is a place of real insecurity about my own illness. And that's not good. That's not a real good reason to say anything or use any kind of word. So I'm going to stop using those words. It might take me a while to get it out of my system, but I give y'all full permission to take me to task on it, especially if you are as nice as the people who messaged me. I'm not going to tell you guys who they are or say their names, but there was at least 4 people who sent me messages through my website or on Facebook or on Twitter, and they all pointed this out with a lot of understanding, saying, I do it all the time too. I know that after someone pointed it out to me, I tended to do it a lot less. And they're right. I have become a lot more aware of how much I use the words. So I want to thank everybody who messaged me about that, and that is something that I'm going to work on. This podcast is supposed to be a safe place for people with all kinds of disabilities, challenges, life experiences, whatever, all of that stuff. And I'm very firm in my belief that witchcraft is open to anyone who wants it, and I'm going to do my best in the new year to exemplify that. Like I said, I'm going to take a page from these handful of people who pointed this out, and I'm going to approach the coming year with a greater amount of understanding for the people that I encounter. And this is going to be my new theme for the year next year, is practicing a little bit of understanding, because I've realized that I'm not so great at that. Earlier this year, I sort of called out a big name pagan. Not even seriously, I didn't even post anything with their name in it or anything, but I sort of called out a big name pagan for a tone deaf Facebook post that showed a real lack of understanding of racial issues and white privilege. It was a Facebook rant about how white privilege isn't real because they've been through challenges themselves, and that's just not how white privilege works. I went on the offensive, as I tend to do, and all those people involved in that naturally went on the defensive. It didn't help. Nothing helped. I didn't help create a space where anyone could learn literally anything. I also wrote off this author's work for a short while and, told a few other people what had happened. And I think hurting someone like that when they're just trying to work and learn and be a better person was not helpful. In hindsight, none of it was helpful. It's really no different than someone bailing on those who are still learning how to be positive in their own way just because they're too negative. I wrote someone off before giving them a chance to learn and to grow. Not everybody is born evolved. I know I was, and I know for a fact I was born just as big of an asshole as everyone else out there, and over time I had to learn how to not be. So I'm going to be a little bit more understanding in the coming year of those moments when people act like assholes just out of ignorance and not out of hatred. Now, I'm not saying that any of you, if you encounter some asshole racist or something with the way that things are going in the US right now, it's not your responsibility to help them see the light. You don't need to teach anybody. That's not your job. And that if you don't do that, that's totally okay and that's your choice. But on a case-by-case basis, I think we should all think about the way that we set someone straight in an event like that. So do you laugh at those people? Do you attack them? Do you throw complicated facts and figures in their face? Do you instantly go trash them on Facebook? Do you expect everyone to kind of be on your level? Because that's not helpful. I have done all those things just in this year alone, not to mention the rest of my life. And I have accomplished very little in any of those instances. Moving forward in 2017, I now approach ignorance with understanding, strength, and the knowledge that everybody's got to start somewhere. And I really hope other people kind of pick up on that idea. I think it'll do a lot, considering how fucked up things are right now. I think that'll do very much. I really hope this idea is contagious, and I hope understanding and compassion spread like an actual disease and inspire those who acted out of hate in this last election in the way that they voted to realize that it's not too late to just learn to be a better person. It's never too late to learn to be a better person. Never. You can always learn and you can always try. And I'm hoping that in the future, while you are learning and trying, I am a little bit more patient. So this issue I've come up against with positivity culture and these chronic positivity addicts consistently turned me off to, quote unquote, new agey stuff like meditation, mindfulness, affirmations, all of that kind of stuff. I have just never found it helpful. And I never really wanted to give it a shot because the way that the people who believed in that stuff acted was really offensive, and I didn't want to be like that. But you know what? Legit. Now that I generally feel too ill to function, I have struggled so hard to feel magical and witchy. I haven't cast a single spell that's done anything at all, and I put as much energy as I have into it. I just don't have enough energy. My intuition feels like it's on low battery, and unless there's some sort of fancy moon going on or a retrograde period, which we're in right now, by the way, I really just feel like a total muggle. I feel like there's cross signals in there, like something's not working. I shook a wire loose. But the one thing that's been making me feel like I'm still connected to anything and that like I still have that in there somewhere is meditating. And it makes me fucking laugh because I have never been a meditator before in my life. in my life. And all of a sudden I can't do anything magical and I can't calm down. I cannot calm down. I cannot stop being angry or sad or whatever. My depression really presents itself as some irrational anger. So I've been struggling to really control that stuff. And I've never been good at meditating. So I realized when I decided to try that I didn't even know how, which is almost embarrassing. Actually, it's real embarrassing, but I had no idea how to meditate. I couldn't do it. I tried sitting there and like crossing my legs and just trying to zone out like I do when I'm going for a walk or a bike ride or when I'm painting or something like that. I have to do something to get into something someone else would consider a meditative state. So I had to learn how to meditate, and I actually had to download apps on my phone that have guided meditations. So I found a couple of apps. I found 3 that promote mindfulness, have free guided meditations for beginners. One of them's got some journaling that I thought would be great and then never used, just like a notebook. And if you guys are interested in those apps, I am going to be posting them in the description of the episode. So I'm not going to sit here and sell you guys some like free iPhone apps. I'm going to post them there if you guys are interested. What I found when I started meditating was that these sentences that chronic positivity people would say to me all the time that would set me on fire were things I was thinking myself. So I found myself thinking things like, maybe I do have a chakra that is out of alignment. This is not something I could figure out for myself. I don't know enough about chakras, but I still thought it and I still wondered about it, and I didn't feel an ounce of rage. Like, if someone else had said that to me, like, oh, I bet your lifelong depression is caused by a chakral imbalance, I would have been very angry. But that just isn't what happened. It was me thinking, maybe this is something that isn't maybe the root cause, but is something I could look into. I started to think, at times, my emotions are volatile. And I can see that this is really hurting other people. And because it wasn't someone else just flippantly writing off all toxic people, I was able to actually think about that and what I planned to do about it instead of wasting time getting angry. One of the worst things anyone could ever say to me in my whole fucking life, because it's just, I've been hearing it at least once a month since I was born, but they say, you are such a negative person. And it really hurts my feelings. It hurts so bad. And you know why? It's because I can't get any help from that statement. There's nothing in that statement to help me. What you're telling me is that I am a negative person. Negativity is part of me and it is emanating from me and it's affecting you. That's not fucking helpful. That's hurtful, and it makes me not want to be around other people. Partly because I'm sick of hearing this stuff, but also because I don't want to hurt other people. That's something I don't want to do. But if someone else, instead of saying you're a negative person, full stop, said something like, I notice you've been struggling super hard to be positive lately. Are you okay? Did something happen? Has something changed? Is there anything I can do? Even if they said something like, I noticed you've been struggling really hard to feel positively, and I'm starting to feel a little overwhelmed. I'm always here for you. I'm your friend, but I'm not your therapist, and I think you need to talk to a professional instead. I would understand it. It would still hurt a little bit, but I would get it, and we'd move on, and we'd talk about something else. There's also a time for something like that. If I come to you crying in the middle of the night and something's really wrong, don't say that. But on an average basis, you can. And it would be different because it's helpful. If someone said, hey, I know it's not like a permanent fix, but I find meditating sometimes really helps me stay mellow when I'm freaking out. If they said that instead of, you need to embrace a more positive lifestyle and banish negativity from your life for good, which is not nearly as helpful or straight to the point, maybe I would have tried it before now. So in the new year, along with understanding, I'm going to be trying out some new magical and metaphysical stuff that I've been writing off for a long, long time. And I think the fact that I was scared off from these more new agey spiritual concepts by the unsupportive people who show up frequently in the movement is kind of a bigger issue than the issue of my hurt feelings. You know, not that my hurt feelings aren't important, because they are. But the idea that this ableist behavior is actually keeping people who are chronically ill or mentally ill or disabled or something from something that could really benefit them and really help them, I find to be way more pressing of an issue. I don't understand how you can hoard something like that to yourself, knowing that it could really help people that have very real illnesses or challenges that they're going through. I don't know why you have to prove that you are worthy of something that could help you get through that stuff. You know what I mean? If I could already get through it, why would I need the spiritual stuff? So I find that to be a really pressing issue, and I find that to be the most important message from this, is that if you feel like you've exhibited some of this ableist behavior towards other people, or you feel like this isn't really an important issue and that you just need to clear toxic people out of your life because that will make your life better, I'm telling you right now that you're keeping sick people from a spiritual idea that could really help them. And that's not very positive. That doesn't have a very positive effect on the world. Of course, not everybody who believes in positivity or practices positivity is ableist. Tess Whitehurst, who I mention on an almost too frequent basis, but I'm sorry, she's great. She's the only kind of new agey author I've ever really liked and really connected to, because she's a little bit more realistic. In one of her books, I believe it was the Good Energy book, she even has like a little something else to consider. You know, these are things that metaphysically could affect things like depression, but if you are dealing with lifelong depression, use these in conjunction with seeking real medical and psychological help. She puts that in there, and I don't believe that's the only time something like that has shown up in her books or in her writing or in the things she's said. I believe that's something she touches on more than one time, and I very, very much appreciate it. So not all positive people are like this, but a lot are, and it still causes problems. So, you know, back up. It just doesn't make any sense. Affirmations, manifesting goals, trying to find, the positive silver linings in your life. This is all stuff that therapists have people do to try to get better, to try to live their best life with their illness. The difference is the therapists aren't telling people to bottle up their feelings, and they don't crawl up that person's butt when they're having one of their hard days, like some of these chronically positive people do. Another problem with chronic positivity that not all therapists promote, but most positive people do, which I find to be very bizarre, is this idea that forgiveness will set you free. Again, while I see the value of that in some situations, I once had a therapist tell me that I didn't owe forgiveness to someone who had abused me. I don't owe anything to the people that abused me. They definitely owe me an apology or some sort of acknowledgement, but I'm not going to get that. Many people never get that from their abuser. But I don't owe them anything. Even if they do apologize, even if they do give me some sort of acknowledgement, I still don't owe them forgiveness. I don't owe that to anyone. I don't owe an abuser anything. She told me that I can move beyond my trauma and my pain from abuse, and my abuser can still exist as just that. I don't need to let them off the hook to get better. And I'm pretty positive that some of you people are hearing that for the first time. Because when a therapist said that to me in my mid-20s for the first time, I almost puked. I was so excited. No one had ever told me that before. Do you know what a weight that lifts off my shoulders? Forgiveness is barely voluntary. Barely. I could say I forgive you for everything, but I don't know how to actually feel that. How do you feel that? I don't forgive you. I can be a happy and well-adjusted person without that. I know I can. So for those of you who are hearing that for the first time, I really want you to take it to heart and maybe, rewind and listen to it a few other times. You don't owe anybody any of that forgiveness. You don't owe it. To those who find practice or these new age concepts that I've mentioned very helpful or fulfilling, that is awesome. It's amazing because the more that I try meditation and affirmations, the more I like them. But I still feel like I can't really talk about them with anybody because some jerk somewhere is going to come out of the woodwork and tell me that, meditation should replace antipsychotics. And I hope I'm making the difference between helpful positivity and ableist positivity very clear. I think what I found most helpful about these less overtly witchy but still magical practices is that when applied without all that really icky ableism, they actually work super well in the real world. It's very subtle. It's all very subtle. Affirmations don't have to be said out loud. And if you want to make them sound more like a little spell, you can make them into, a little rhyming poem or something like that. Like you can write your own affirmations to sound in whatever way works best for you. You just have to keep them something simple that you can remember. That's super helpful. Super, super helpful. One I found online that I really, really liked, and that was just very quick and to the point, is all is well and so am I. That's just it. That's just it. All is well, and so am I. And I don't need to get into detail and think, well means healthy, and I'm not healthy, so I'm not actually well. I don't need to think about that stuff. I can just sit there. I can breathe. I find that one especially helpful when I'm trying to get to sleep, and I'm too stressed out, or I'm scared, or something. All is well, and so am I. It's basically just, I don't have to worry about anything right now. It's okay. You have the freedom to relax, to calm down, and to feel safe right here in this space. And that's something short and sweet that you can just say to yourself all the time. All is well, and so am I. Mind-blowing stuff. I know, it's so wonderful. So these quick calm down affirmations, meditations, grounding, all of this stuff can be done, in a public bathroom or in your car, or in your office, or even standing in line at the DMV because everyone's ignoring everybody and no one makes any eye contact. No one's going to notice if your eyes are closed and you're maybe whispering to yourself. It's awesome. It's awesome. You don't have to whip out a bunch of witch tools and, start splashing Florida water around, which is what I do now. I have a bottle of Florida water in every room and I just kind of just splash myself and around me all the time to clear stuff out. But I don't really need to. With these new age things, you don't really need all that stuff. You don't really need to throw salt or get out your Florida water. A lot of them talk about holding a crystal, which is pretty cool. So I really like how easy and subtle some of this more new agey stuff is, and I can do it wherever I'm having a problem. But it's very telling to me that the way in which I used to write off new agey stuff was, I have to live in the real world, and being positive 25/8 just isn't realistic. And while that's, obviously true, I'm finding out that what just doesn't work in the real world is actually the victim blaming and ableism that I get from a lot of people who tend to push the new agey school of thought on people. That's what doesn't work. The actual stuff, starting to work all the time. I don't know about yoga. I can't really do yoga. My body's not really built for that. And it's not a fat thing. As soon as I said it, I realized someone might be like, oh yeah, you're huge. It's not because I'm fat. I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, as I've mentioned before, and I have a tendency to pop my joints out of place, as I like to say it. It's called a subluxation. They just pop out of place. Hurts like so bad. It just hurts so bad. And it's just not worth going to a yoga class to find out if anyone else can pop my hip back in. So it's not really worth it. But that could be helpful too. The issue of ableism doesn't just affect those with mental illness either. And this is something that I've talked about a lot on this show, and is kind of a bit of a central theme, if I'm being totally honest. This inability to evolve as a community or a movement or whatever religion to be more inclusive of everyone. If you truly believe that this path is right and good and helpful, then why would you deny that to people based on things like an illness or trauma or any of the stuff I've talked about, based on their biology, their genitals, where they were born, what their skin color is? Why would you deny something you find so helpful to other people based on these weird little things that they're just not a reason to exclude people? In her book, Ritual Facilitation, Shauna Ora-Knight tackles this issue of inclusivity at rituals, and she talks a little bit about ableism. So she brings up some of the stuff we've talked about before, like transphobia and how focused on heterosexuality a lot of rituals and groups can be. She brings up things like physical accessibility, allergies to things like smoke or sage that are used all the time in ritual, and even standing up through ritual. She points out that maybe your beautiful secluded grove away from any city by miles is an amazing location for a ritual, but that those who don't drive or have trouble walking or frequently need to sit are not really considered. If you have someone in your community who's in a wheelchair and they need to wheel themselves out to the middle of the woods, that's not really so helpful for them if there's no system in place by the rest of you to get them out there safely. Or, a new location that everyone could get to. You know what I mean? It's not all that hard. You just got to think about it. And that's what's really important, is that this is just stuff that you should consider more often. And this is another one that I am actually a little bit guilty of. In the past, I actually complained super hard about a pagan thing being hosted inside on a really nice sunny day. I'm a super outside person, and this bothered me to no end. I couldn't believe that anything pagan was happening indoors. So ridiculous. I'm just ridiculous. But now when I come at that issue with this more understanding perspective, some wouldn't have been able to come and to enjoy themselves and to meet other like-minded people had the event been fully outdoors. And that alone makes it not worth it for me. And as an organizer, that's something I wouldn't have considered before, but something I would really think about now. Not all of the book, Ritual Facilitation, deals with this issue, but the whole book is filled with really great advice for those leading ritual or trying to form a group or just trying to expand your practice to include more group rituals. So if you guys want to check it out, it's called Ritual Facilitation by Shauna Ora-Knight. I got it from Amazon. It's fantastic. Another issue that I learned about just recently, just in the last few months, and that I think is important for magical people to consider, is how you celebrate your Sabbats and holidays, and how much they revolve around food. I mentioned this briefly in a recent blog post I did called Up Your Pagan Potluck Game. Featured a picture of Martha Stewart and Snoop Dogg on it, so if you're looking for it, that's the one. And it's consideration for those who struggle with eating disorders or difficult relationships with food and alcohol. You cannot just tell by looking at somebody if they have an eating disorder or a substance abuse problem, though a lot of people think that you can. You just can't. It's also not really anyone's business, but that person and their support system. So occasions with tons of emphasis on food or drink can be totally exhausting, if not too difficult for them to even show up. And that's another thing I've never thought about before. The alcohol, maybe a little bit more, but the idea that the presence of so much food and so much emphasis being on food, both at the end of the ritual and then afterwards, is very upsetting for someone who is trying to deal with their issues with food, who's in therapy and has a plan for themselves on how to deal with the stuff. This could be very difficult. And it could make people just not show up. And that's just not worth it. So I think that in this new year, finding new ways for us as pagans or witches or new age people or whatever to celebrate and to share our spirituality with other people or to nourish ourselves should be everyone's goal. Basically, I think a good way to approach the topic of ableism and people in your community that have some challenges that you might not have considered in either ritual or in conversation, even in any way. I think you should approach everyone as if you don't know the whole story and you're also not their doctor, their parent, their priest. Maybe you don't need to tell them how to run their life. And maybe you need to take into consideration the issues that some people live with and that they might not want to talk about it out loud. And that you should just consider that stuff in advance. It's not easy, but it's also not hard. It's one of those issues where it just requires a change, and change is really scary for some people. But change is worth it if it leads to something better. And I think walking through this world, having a little bit more understanding of the people around you and why they do the things they do or ask you to do the things that they ask you to do, I think instead of trying to find reasons for that or justify it or trying to find a way to make that work better for you, we should all just kind of work together to make everything a little bit better for everybody and not just ourselves. Hippie stuff. Isn't it fun? I love hippie stuff. Okay, so before the episode is over, I have a book review of Shadows for you guys. I also have a few announcements about the podcast. So sit tight, and here is our new book review of Shadows. So our new book review of Shadows is a little bit different than the other books that I've reviewed. First of all, this book contains the most wonderful pun I've ever read. So today's book on the book review of Shadows is The Coloring Book of Shadows by Amy Cesari. And the title's making me flip out just a little bit. Amy actually messaged me through the website and asked if I would review her book on the podcast, and I'm so glad she did that. So Amy, thank you so much for the book, for contacting me in general. It's amazing, and it made me feel pretty good about myself. So since this thing showed up in my mailbox, I find myself grabbing it every time I've got a half an hour or an hour or more where I need something to just do without needing to think about it. I've watched so much less TV since this thing came in, and I'm not even very good at coloring. So when I first looked at the book, I kind of wish the pages were perforated so I could pull out the ones that I've done to put them somewhere else, like a lot of other adult coloring books are. But once I actually sat down and read through it and explored the book a little bit more, I totally changed my mind about that. This book is laid out like an actual book of shadows or a grimoire with title pages, note pages, correspondences, herbs, moon phases, rocks. It's amazing. It's all there. At the beginning of the book, it mentions that you can photocopy pages, talks about which art supplies work best on the paper that's actually in the book, and it lists some ideas of what you can write in a lot of the blank spaces and note pages, which really makes that perforated pages thing I had thought about totally unnecessary. Instead, this book is something that you can actually use while you're practicing or writing spells or planning out your events. This is something that you can just carry around and doodle in or use to create your sigils or write your spells in or whatever. Like it's a lot more useful in the moment than I thought that it would be. I was very surprised about that. So that's not to say that the book only works if you keep it all together and use it like a notebook. There are tons of fun ways to photocopy and use these pages. I've been daydreaming about them since I got the book. So some of the pages in here offer a close-up image of individual crystals or herb specimens, and it has about 9 of them on the page. Actually, I'm looking at it. Yeah, it has 9 of them on the page, and they each have a little square. What I thought would be really, really cool is to photocopy those pages for someone who's trying to learn. And what I would do is I would either give them an actual specimen of the plant or the rock, or I would bring up pictures, and they'd have to color in the rock or the plant or the Look at that. There's a resin in here and a root. You'd have to color that to make it look like the actual thing. And then on the back of each little square, cut it out so that it's all little individual squares like cards. And on the back, you could write some of the correspondences for that stuff. And I think that would be really, really a cool activity for anyone who's looking to learn stuff like that. It's fun, flashcards, but you have to color them in, right? It's great. The Sabbath pages are really beautiful. And I had this really fun idea of taking out or photocopying the page for that Sabbath, coloring it up, and then there's a blank space on all the Sabbath pages, and have everyone who's there at your Sabbath sign it or add colors or doodles or whatever, and then laminate it or frame it later as like a little keepsake of the Sabbath that you've hosted there. You could even then photocopy it or scan it for other people, whatever. And I think that would be super, super fun. If you do it, I would love it if you would show me a picture. The pages for the zodiac signs would also make an amazing gift. And in that spot, you could write something about the person or add photos. You could put it in a frame. And I think that would be really cool. Really, really cool. So like I said, there's lots of different ways to photocopy and use these pages outside of their regular function in the book. Finally, there's the design of the book. And I just don't know how to tell you guys how much I love it. I think it is absolutely beautiful. It's just beautiful. It's both modern and retro. There's doodles in here right next to like fine art type drawings. Some of it's really realistic and some of it is just whimsical and silly and fun. It's totally amazing. If you are way more skilled with your art supplies than I am, in the beginning it talks about including a lot more detail and shading with the very minimal lines she's put in here. So that, if you are an artist, you can work with that. But if you just stay in the lines or don't, whatever, throw some paint in there and just start watercoloring, you still end up with something that I think is really gorgeous and even could go into a frame just because of the amazing artistry that went into designing each page. This is my first time reviewing a coloring book, but I can confidently say that this one deserves 5 crystal balls out of 5. It's just amazing. I would especially recommend it to new witches or pagans or new age people, pagan kids or teens, or really ultra creative witchy types that are trying to... If you notice that someone does a lot of doodling in their own book of shadows, I think they would really, really like this. I really like this book because it encourages them to doodle and scribble and color as they're filling stuff in. I really think it would also be an amazing gift. It's one of those things that maybe not everyone would buy for themselves, although they'd be, sad if they didn't. But it's one of those things, I don't think everybody really understands the adult coloring book thing. But if you want to try an adult coloring book, I think this is a really great place to start. And if you are already into the coloring book thing and really want to expand your kind of creative stuff that you do magically, this book is a really great book of shadows. And there's also a Color Your Tarot out there that's made by Llewellyn. And I think it would be a really cool gift to throw together the coloring book, the Color Your Tarot, and some really great coloring pencils. So the coloring book Shadows, 5 crystal balls out of 5. What I said at the beginning of this episode is that I've got something new for you to practice some mindfulness. And this is the book for you to practice some mindfulness. Adult coloring books have become incredibly popular recently. In the last couple of years, they've just exploded. They're everywhere. And you can find everything from, I have a Harry Potter coloring book that's actually for like grown-ups. So there's a Harry Potter coloring book, but that's for grown-ups. There are coloring books full of mandalas or paisley or just, patterns and things, just patterns. There are also coloring books that are filled with plants or animals or places. And you can get a coloring book that almost fits with what everybody is into, which is really cool. But part of the reason that coloring books have so exploded recently is their connection to the mindfulness movement, which is associated with the positivity stuff, the new age stuff. Mindfulness is basically the practice of being in this moment right now, not really thinking of what you have to do later or what you've done in the past, but being in this moment right now and feeling calm and relaxed. It's a lot of times it's something you do in motion. A lot of people practice mindfulness while coloring. For an example, And what they find is that it's just an opportunity to let your creative mind kind of take over and start thinking about things like which colors to pick, how to draw these lines. All you're really thinking about is the thing that you are coloring right now, the colors that you're using, the way that your hand is moving, the things that you're seeing. And all of that has tremendous value. It really pulls you out of things like stress and anxiety, even for only a little bit. And I find that when I do something like that for the rest of the day, I find it a little bit easier for me to calm down because things aren't adding up. You know what I mean? The stuff from this morning isn't still bothering me if I've taken some moments in between in the middle of the day to meditate or do something like this where I kind of just get out of my head for a little while. So if that's something that you feel that you need and that could help you out magically, the Coloring Book of Shadows is a perfect place for you to start because it's still very magical. It's so magical. It's so magical and so pretty. There's swirls and crystals and beautiful big leaves and stars just everywhere. Honestly, you're gonna love it. You're really gonna love it. Okay, that is our book review of Shadows. I really hope you guys enjoy it. And if you are interested in getting a copy of the book review of Shadows, if you're interested in getting a copy of the Coloring Book of Shadows, you can get it from the website at coloringbookofshadows.com. And she does have an Instagram account where she posts regular photos of the stuff people color from the coloring book, and it's, at Coloring Book of Shadows. So check out the book and check out Amy Cesarian line. She's got lots of really cool, beautiful, witchy artwork up there for you to gawk at and ogle. You'll love it. Okay. I think that's it. I really think that's everything. So before I sign off, I just want to say that I really missed y'all. Like I said, that wasn't a joke. I really missed you guys. And not just because I have no therapist and my best friend doesn't like me anymore, but I really realized that I just don't have anyone to talk to about witch stuff. You guys are the ones I talk to about witch stuff. You're the ones I talk to about this stuff. And aside from a few jerks that I've come across, the support and the encouragement that I receive from the listeners of this show and those that I've met because I do this show has just been, it's immeasurable. I cannot thank all of you people enough for listening. Whenever I feel like I'm not making a difference, or I'm not doing things right, one of you will message me or share something personal with me or ask my opinion on your work, and it's all really amazing that you feel like I'm the person you could come to for that. I never really imagined that I could function as a source of strength for other people. And oddly enough, right now, when I kind of am searching for an external source of spiritual strength, it's good to be reminded that I don't need to look elsewhere and that there still is this cool, strong witch in there somewhere. Even if she doesn't come out as much as she used to, right? And you've let me know that I'm on the right path here. I just need to keep going. Everybody struggles, right? Just keep on going, keep on trucking, as I unfortunately say too often. So thank you for being so nice to me. It made a huge difference for me this year and in 2015 when I started, but it really made a difference this year, especially because I just needed it so much. And it really helped get me through some of this trash I've been dealing with. So, I love you. And thank you for being here. And here is to a magical, prosperous, and way more understanding year for all of us witches. Fat, feminist, or otherwise.